This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
This is the Biz Doctor podcast, and I'm your host, Lauren Goldstein. Welcome back to the show. I'm beyond excited about today's show because I have special guest, Dr. Marcie Beigel, joining us here in the studio. On today's episode, we're going to talk about something that I'm so passionate about and something that I believe needs to be talked about more: mental health, specifically how our mental health directly impacts our businesses, and surprisingly, our family culture. Bet you didn't know families had cultures just like businesses, did you? I sure didn't before I met Marcie. It's going to be an episode you do not want to miss, especially if you're riding the entrepreneurial roller coaster of emotions recently. Marcie and I are going to talk about how to create mental well-being in your business and your life as you lead and grow your business. It is something I see entrepreneurs struggle with and which I personally have struggled with over the years. So my hope is that today's episode will give you some valuable tools to put your well-being first and manage the stress, anxiety, and sometimes depression that comes with being a business owner and a human being, so that we can live more full lives. Before diving into today's episode, let me properly introduce my guest here in the studio, Dr. Marcie Beigel. For more than 20 years, Dr. Marcie has been helping organizations build the bridge between mental health and business, creating culture change with families, schools, and organization, sharing her tools and strategies with thousands. She's helped families shift from breakdown and disconnection to happy dances and memorable moments. Wow, that sounds amazing. Dr. Marcie believes the best way to create change is through inspiration and experience. This means her work with both organizations and families is experiential, engaging, and practical because change only matters if it lasts. Dr. Marcie earned her doctorate from Teachers College at Columbia University and is a board-certified behavior analyst, doctorate level. She's a best-selling author of Love Your Family Again, Love Your Classroom Again. She's based in New York City, though loves to travel to her clients around the world. She's been guest behavioral expert on national media, including Fox, ABC, and NBC. Sharing her passion for behavior has led her to speak at organizations ranging from individual school districts to the Royal Australian Navy to TEDx Naperville. For more information about her programs and training, visit drmarcie.com. Bottom line, Dr. Marcie is going to help us build the bridge between mental health and business because it all comes down to what's happening between our ears. I'm so excited to have you. Welcome to the show, Marcie.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I am so excited for the conversation we're about to have.
Me too. Me too. This is such an important subject. And I knew when we met all those many months ago and connected on this subject that I just knew that I had to have you on the show. So I'm glad we are actually here recording it today.
Yes. And it's one of those things that we always put them in separate boxes, but business and mental health go hand in hand.
They do indeed, which I cannot wait to dive into that. And we're actually going to touch on 3 key points. The first is, how many of us are not taught how to manage our stress or anxiety or depression, yet it impacts everything we do. So you're going to share some small steps that will help listeners take care of their mental health. We're also going to talk about the overlap between our work and mental well-being. And of course, removing the stigma about talking about mental health. And I cannot wait to dive in. But the first place I really want you to start is I would love for you to share a bit more about your story and the amazing work you do with business owners so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better.
Absolutely. So I actually really believe that I do what I do because of the journey I had with my own mental health growing up. Mm-hmm. That there was a point in time when I was in high school where I really struggled and didn't know what was wrong. And thankfully, I had a very wise doctor that I was seeing at the time for physical health problems. That's a different story. Who said, you're not okay. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, you don't look okay. You need help. And encouraged my parents to get me to a therapist who I saw for a year or 2. At this point, I don't remember, who gave me the tools that allowed me to navigate these really big feelings I was having that I didn't know how to navigate. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that not everyone sat in their bedroom crying at the end of the school day. Like it never occurred to me that there was a way to do this better until I was given the tools. And then, wow, the world opened. And over time and over the years, I started working with kids first and realized that what we do with our kids, we do in our businesses as well. The way we do one thing is the way we do everything. Is that so many people don't have these tools or don't know how to do it. And that if I can share how we do this, right? I'm trained as a behaviorist, the actions connected to our feelings, because they're intimately connected, then everything becomes possible. And it's not just a white knuckle it, power through, get it done, regardless of how you feel, but feel your feelings, use the tools, and love what you do. And when we do that, we have families we love, we have businesses that we love, we have lives that we love. And so I am delighted that I get to spend my life and spend my days and made my own business around helping other people love the work they do in the world, love their life, and love their family.
Oh, I'm so excited to dive in because I think that what you do is so needed and so necessary because, speaking for myself, I grew up in a family where, I got told things like, you want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about it. And so like having feelings was not safe. And, I'm not saying I had terrible parents. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I had parents that learned from their parents, that emotions are weakness or emotions are not things that you show. And having a Southern family, keeping up the side and, everything's fine. And, you just don't talk about these things. But then they end up spilling out in, I think, really unhelpful ways when we don't actually process them. And I was actually watching a Brene Brown, her Atlas of the Heart. I don't know if you watched it on HBO Max, but she says, she quoted someone. I can't remember who she quoted, but her whole thing is a lot about emotion. And she said, we think that we are human beings that do thinking and occasionally have emotions, but really what we are is emotional beings that occasionally think. And so I think what I love and why I'm so excited to have this conversation is mental health and emotion go hand in hand. And I feel like something I've been going through my emotional intelligence leadership journey is the more you let your emotions flow, the healthier you will be. And they're not something to be afraid of or not to, there are certain obviously times and places for them, but the more you can be friends with them, the more you'll, succeed.
Mm-hmm. And that so much good in what you just said, but that piece of there are certain times and places and that we shouldn't be afraid of our emotions. To me, that's key. Because when we know how to feel our feelings, when we know how to process what's been going on in our emotional place, then it's easy to wait. It's easy to say, I'm in a meeting, my client is being horrible. I want to rip their head off, but I'm going to stay poised and I'm going to have the conversation that needs to be had and stay professional. And then I'm going to go tonight and take a kickboxing class and get out all my rage. But when we don't know how to do that, when we haven't done the work, when we don't have any tools, that's when we end up blowing up at our client, losing the deal, having problems at work because we just messed everything up, not just for ourselves, but for our company. And things come out sideways when we don't deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's so important that we start talking about it because it's not just, oh yeah, that's a thing we deal with later, but it impacts every conversation we have, every interaction that goes on. If you need to have more grace, if you need to figure out how to feel more confident in that meeting to just be like, oh yes, we can do this. And then know on the back end, you'll figure it out. All of that is emotional intelligence. Having employees, running a business where people feel wanted and cared for and valued, which we know is how you retain employees.
It is.
It's how you retain clients when they feel connected to you. That's all emotional intelligence. So without these skills, which have been like behind closed doors, and as you said, our parents' generation, and for many currently, it's a taboo subject, but it's not because we're all living it all the time.
I think that's such an important point about, emotions being taboo and we really don't talk about it. And I know that, for so many, business is this thing that doesn't have emotion, when in reality, like, it's humans doing business with humans. And so if we cut out the emotional component and we just make it this very surgical thing, then that's not going to be successful. And, I look to little kids. I love watching little kids because it's absolutely mortifying when they have a meltdown in public and we're just like, oh my God, can you please get your stuff together? Like, people are looking. But then 2 minutes later, they're totally fine and they're laughing. And I think we can learn a lot from kids because they don't stuff emotions like us as adults. Like, somewhere along the lines, we were told to stop being emotional, stop all this stuff. But in reality, like, the more you process it, the faster you process it, the faster you can actually move forward. And so I think that's a lot about what you were talking about just now, where it impacts everything if you're not aware of it.
Absolutely. And I love the analogy to kids because I have two big pieces of my business. One is with kids and families, and one is businesses and organizations, exactly for that reason. And the truth is, kids having meltdowns is part of their learning, is part of their process. And it can be really overwhelming to watch a kid scream their head off and kick and just have it's messy. It's just messy at breakdown like that. And they don't know what else to do with those big feelings. And because it makes us, the grownups, uncomfortable to see all of that, and because it's not always the appropriate time and place, the answer really is teaching them how to have those big feelings. What can we do? What can we do physically with our body, with our words, to either create a change so we don't feel that way, or to move all of that energy in our body? You're angry? Can we jump it out? Because if you're 3, jumping it out is so much better than falling to the floor. And we move it successively from there, right? So as adults, it's that same thing. We weren't taught when we were 3 what to do in those big giant meltdowns. And so now it sometimes still happens. But when we're adults, we're less likely to fall apart and have a tantrum. It more shows up like anxiety or depression, because that is a more acceptable, quote unquote, way to have those emotions. And because it's been buried layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of all of these moments that we didn't digest, now we have moments where we just don't want to get out of bed, where we think everybody is judging us, where we're worried we're going to be fired tomorrow every day for 3 years. And that stress is not good for us to live in. Yet we do. And we'd rather live there than talk about our mental health. Like, come on now. Come on. Let's have the conversation. Let's do the hard thing, just like we teach 3-year-olds to do the hard thing and ask their friend to give their toy back.
I think there's so many things at play here. I mean, one, I don't know about you, but the comparison game as entrepreneurs, like, there are days when I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm doing all the things, and why are we not here or there? And comparing, especially with social media, like, that could be a whole nother podcast episode about social media and mental health. But like, comparing my behind the scenes of my business to their highlight reel, and seeing like how that makes the anxiety or the depression creep in, and what I call the emotional, the entrepreneur roller coaster of emotions. So I'm right there. I'm right there with you.
Yeah. And no one is doing the same journey we are. Even if we think we are, we're all entrepreneurs. We're all trying to build a great business. We're all trying to impact the world in our unique way. And somewhere along the line, we have stopped being taught to celebrate someone else's successes and instead use it as a measure of our failure. And that's not the deal. And it's super interesting because in my own journey, I learned so many things about emotional intelligence, mental intelligence through my business that I then go, oh, right. Okay. And then I get the emotional lesson. But the idea of showing up and celebrating somebody else we're taught scarcity. We're taught that there's not enough. And especially when you see it on social media, we'll like their post and then be like, I can't believe, why are they doing, and be all grumpy about it, rather than genuinely celebrating them, liking it on social media, sending them a message and being like, hey, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what I have found, the more moments I have been able to lift myself up and genuinely be happy and celebrate a friend, a colleague, a person I aspire to know, and share with them how inspired I am by their work, the more I actually find inspiration in my work. It's this really amazing thing of good begets good. And it's true. Like, you know, we've all heard the law of attraction and all of that woo-woo, and we think it's woo-woo, but it's not. When we show up and see good in the world, we realize it's possible for us to do it ourselves. When we realize it's possible for us to do it ourselves, it makes it so much more likely that we are going to get up and go do it. If you can, I can. Let's go. Let's do it together.
Yes. I love that. I love that, especially because if you think about how the brain works, it's like a giant radio that you just got to tune it into the right station. And I talk about this a lot with my clients when we're talking about leadership or building in the right team. Like, it doesn't matter if you like jazz. If jazz is not your superpower, you're going to feel weird trying to dance to jazz. So maybe you're country music, maybe you're heavy metal. Like, it doesn't matter. But when you tune your brain into, I don't know if I want to say positive or negative, but the things that serve you, possibilities, then you just have this like much different perspective, because nobody wants to be Eeyore. Like, nobody wants to be that person that brings people down, which I think is another reason why we struggle talking about it, because we're like, oh, we don't want to like rain on somebody's parade or talk about it. But I think there's a difference between asking for support and saying, I'm really struggling in this moment, versus living in, you know, the excuses or the complaining instead of the possibility. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you think about that.
Yeah. So we connect with people by talking, right? Spending time together, sharing stories. This has always been how humans connect. And when we're having a hard time, talking about it is important, because that's part of how we process. You can't solve a problem without problem solving. You can't think yourself out of an emotional problem without actually having that conversation. And there's a big difference between talking to problem solve and process and sitting in the tornado of your feelings. Now, we all have moments where we just need to like vent and get it out. But at some point, we have to decide to stop and move forward. And that is the place where it is productive. We've all known that person, whether it's at work or in our personal life, who just always has a problem. It always sounds the same. The details change, but nothing ever gets better in that person's life.
Yep.
That is not good mental health practice. That is a person who sees the world as a problem. But good mental health says, I'm really having a hard time and I need someone to listen to me. And if it's too much for a friend, that's why they're a therapist, because that is their job. If you need tools, we need to go to the places where there are tools. And it's not necessarily your friends, but your friends can help you problem solve. They can sympathize and empathize. They can allow you to feel human as opposed to crazy, because we are taught that these challenges are crazy, but they're not. They're just human. And when you start being brave enough to say, I feel really alone and isolated. I'm really scared about what's going to happen if I lose my job because I have a mortgage payment. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And when you say that to someone and they say, I've been there. I've felt that too. This helped me get through it. This changed that for me. You're not alone, and we'll help you figure it out if anything happens. All of a sudden, there's more ability to breathe. There's more space. There's more possibility. And the key is to get to the place where you can put tools in place, where you know what those tools are. And one of them is not feeling alone. It's one of the number one mental health tools. especially when you're in crisis, which is usually that first phrase when you haven't talked to anybody about it and just feel all the feelings or have just gone through something big and hard. Knowing that you're not alone, having someone there to sit with you is life-changing. So let the people in your life be there for you.
Oh, there's so much juiciness in there. And I heard somebody say this to me once, because I don't know about you, but, I like to be a strong, independent person who's like, it's okay. I don't want to weigh you down. And I think a lot of our society sometimes has learned how to commiserate on things that aren't working instead of celebrating things that are. So I try to really, celebrate things that are working. But he said to me, you're robbing people of the ability to support you because you're not asking for support. And like one of the greatest gifts we can give each other is supporting each other and having that conversation. And I was like, wait, so you're telling me that I'm trying not to be selfish here, but I'm actually being selfish? What? And it broke my brain and gave me a totally different perspective on asking for and receiving support, which I think is something, especially as women business owners, I think we have a lot of work to do about receiving support because, we don't want to be judged or perceived as weak or all the things that we think people might be thinking. And so I love what you said about, it's like the first step is like talking about it and getting out of this echo chamber. And I think that is sometimes the hardest first step. And honestly, why I love working with my clients in our advisory program, because it's lonely in the top. And sometimes you just need to have that person that doesn't know knows your team, but like isn't in your team, like isn't in your family, like that unbiased third party. So this is a shameless plug of if you don't have a therapist or a business consultant or advisor, go get yourself one, because I've had a therapist for years and business coaches. And there's just something special about that safe space that that you can say some crazy stuff and it's going to be totally fine.
Okay, that is not a shameless plug. This is exactly why we're having this conversation. We need to be able to boldly say, if you don't have someone to talk to and you are struggling, find the right person. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't just mean decide whether it's a therapist or a business coach or an advisory board. It doesn't just matter the type of support, but who. Mm-hmm. When parents call me for my therapy practice, they've also called 4 or 5 or 6 other people because I might not be the right answer for them.
Yeah.
You have to find the right match, the right fit. So if you've done therapy once for 3 sessions and it didn't work for you, maybe you were with the wrong therapist.
Yeah.
So no shameless plug there. Really important recommendation, because that's a giant tool to go find someone, find a group. There's so many ways to do it. The other thing that you said that I love is whoever you're having that conversation with is brilliant. Because, and as you said, as women business owners, we want to help everyone. You have a problem, I'm there yesterday. You need to talk about it. I'm ready. It's the end of my day. It's 9:00. I got nothing left. But yeah, I'll get on the phone with you. We're willing to give and give and give, and it makes us feel good. Yet when we need to ask for help, we feel ashamed, we feel embarrassed, we feel horrible, and we'd rather crawl under a rock and fail hard than ask for help. Mm-hmm. That's wrong.
That's so wrong.
That's wrong. And yes, we have to have clarity of boundaries of who we're asking for what and how they might respond, aka why a therapist or a business coach or an advisor might be a great person, because they are there just to listen. Mm-hmm. But if you are the person who is willing to say yes to any friend, any colleague that needs help, then also be willing to ask them for help, because they also want to provide.
Yes. A phrase I've mentioned on previous podcasts, but a phrase that changed my life was, what do you need from me in this moment? Do you need me to listen, or do you need me to just support or problem solve? because I found that a lot of conflict, or dare I say frustrations with my own mental health after conversations, resulted in me thinking they needed me to like fix something or problem solve, when really they just wanted to vent. And so I think it's a constant, I don't know, evolution for us women business owners to recognize that boundaries are mental health.
Yes.
And I know you guys can't see this. We can see each other in studio, and she's
I am dancing.
She's dancing behind her microphone. But there's this really interesting thing that I sometimes see with my clients, where they feel like if they have boundaries with their team or their family, that they're not being supportive or they're being mean, or any other adjective. And actually what I find is when you are able to put up those boundaries, you suddenly have a fuller cup. You're able to be a better leader. You have better communication. And here's a really funny side effect is you stop enabling your team, and you in fact allow them, she's dancing again, y'all. You allow them to start being more autonomous, which is a little scary for business owners who are in the thick of it. But I would love for you to talk more about, you know, this idea that if we have boundaries, that somehow, you know, it's creating this opposite effect, like it's creating disconnection and on all these things, when I think in reality, it's actually one of the most healthy things we can do.
Mm-hmm. I love some boundaries. They are great. We should all dance and have parties around boundaries. Because the truth is, when you quote unquote don't have boundaries, you do. They just way overrun your capacity. You have some line where you're like, I'm now dead asleep and can't give you anything else. So 2 things that you said that I loved. One is having boundaries empowers your staff. There are so many businesses that I've worked on, that I've worked with, that I've worked near, where the leadership is exhausted. They feel like their team doesn't do anything without their say-so, without their approval, without their go-ahead, without the check-in. And they're like, what is that? Well, lo and behold, every time it is that the staff is scared to take a step because leadership is always micromanaging. When we have boundaries and we say, go, knowing that our staff may fail and have to redo it, which is okay, or may do it differently than us, which is also okay, that creates independence. That creates them being able to go do their job and us supervise and lead the way we should. So all day long, if you are feeling that way, you need to check, what are you doing? How are you participating in the fact that your staff won't do anything on their own? Because it's always a two-way street.
Yes.
And that comes back to you as a leader being willing to let go of control. And taking that breath and creating space, because that is part of your emotional intelligence work. In order to grow your business, you cannot do everything like you did when you started it, which is actually what you want. And it means it won't be exactly as you wanted it, but it will be amazing and impactful and beautiful. So let people go do their magic. Let them do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that shift from chief everything officer to visionary CEO is I see a lot of times like the biggest step a business owner can make. And it really presents really funny symptoms that obviously you and I can see from a mile away, but they're in it. You can't read the label from the bottle. But one of those symptoms is I see, speaking of control, I see a lot of times the control actually gets amplified. The more they want out, the more control they're like trying to hold on to. And I actually did a post on social media a few weeks back that basically said, you know, I think one of these hurdles to giving up control, which comes back to mental health, is the question of, if I'm not in my business every day and I'm not needed at the level that I'm needed right now, who the heck am I? Like, oh my, I don't, like, what is my value? And I think that this value for effort thing that we have created in America, and I think throughout the world, but mostly in America, is really impacting our mental health because we're like, oh, we're feeling kind of crappy about ourselves. Probably should work harder.
Yes. That's not right.
It's not right.
Mm-mm.
Like, what?
No. And as you said, it's connected to our worth.
Mm-hmm.
I am worth having a 7-figure business if I work my tail off. I am worthy of having this impact in the world because I never sleep anymore. But I am worthy to go sit on the beach and have a vacation for 3 days. All of a sudden hit something inside of us where we go, well, I'm not worthy. I better call and check in and make sure everything's okay and that the business didn't burn down while I was gone. No, you're worthy. But that behavior, those actions in leadership go back to you doing your mental health work to know that you are worthy because you built it, because you led the company to that place, but mostly you're worthy because you're a human. And when we can get to a place where our worth is not tied to our business, we're willing to take bigger risks to make bigger impact, because if we fail, it doesn't mean that we as a human have failed.
Yes.
We can
Gosh.
detach.
Let's go there.
Yeah.
Let's go there. Let's go and follow that thread of, if I try this thing in my business, if I hire this new person, we launch this new thing, if we expand and I fail, that means I'm a failure. Let's talk about that, because that is a very real thought that goes through a lot of business owners' minds.
I've been there, and it gets tied to, who am I to do that? Who am I to be listened to? Who am I to say that, to make that, to impact that? Well, who aren't you? Right? And if not you, then who? And if you have the dream and you have the passion and you have the vision, then go, do. And we think that failure is the end, that if we hire this person and it doesn't work, we are a horrible person, we are a failure, and our business is a failure.
Yep.
Well, if you're running a business and it is how you pay your rent and other people pay their rent and you keep a roof over your head and food on the table, well, then you have to take calculated, intelligent risks, but take the risk, because the only time failure is really failure is if you didn't learn something. So hire the person, see how it goes. It might be a fabulous disaster. You still have a roof over your head. You still have some clients. Not everything is, you're not living in a cave eating, berries that you foraged. Cool. Great. Then try again. What did you learn from hiring that person? What didn't work well? Was it about your hiring process? Was it about the role you thought you were filling? Was it about your lack of clarity? I will tell you, the first time I hired anyone for my business, I was like, I need help. I don't know with what. Just help, please. And found some lovely person who was willing to help me figure out what that was. It lasted about 6 months. And then I was like, okay, right. You're not the right person that I need to be doing this thing, but now I know what it is.
Yes.
And you got to be willing to take that risk. So either find someone who will gently help you find it, or do it and fail miserably. I have hired other people and failed miserably because it just wasn't the right match. And I didn't know the right questions to ask. And I was growing and didn't know how. So I tried something, it didn't work, but I learned. So it's okay. And I can try again.
Yes. I love that. They say you want more success, fail faster.
Yes.
Which, makes my recovering perfectionist get triggered. But I think, there's a really great analogy that I use with my clients about building a house. And you put in the plumbing and the electricity first. You have to actually, you don't just put up the drywall and the paint and decorate the whole house and then test out the plumbing and electricity. You do it when the walls are open, which is a very great analogy about, we launch stuff when we're vulnerable and our walls are open and we're like, well, I don't know if this is going to work. Or we hire somebody when we're, on the cusp and we're really trying to figure it out. And luckily the work that I do with clients is to kind of mitigate that mishire, because you actually more thoughtfully think about it and you get the clarity of the role. But it still happens, you still do the best you can and it still doesn't work. And that's why I love postmortems. Like, what worked, what didn't work, what can we learn? Like, heck, I do a postmortem on Thanksgiving. Like, what went really well, what didn't, what are we going to do next year? Like, maybe we'll bake the pies the day before instead of the day of. Like, what was I thinking?
Yep. Yep.
So I love this.
And the other piece of it is that as business owners, we think that we have to learn everything in our business, right? And I shared that I often learn things in my business and then take it into the rest of my life. But we can do it the other way. If you are a recovering perfectionist, or still a perfectionist, where are there things that you could do slightly off to your normal routine and see that it works? Like, could you buy a piece of clothing in a color that you never wear and see if you wear it? Can you not do all of the dishes, but leave a cup in the sink overnight? Like, can you leave your shoes by a different door than the front door of your house? Like, can you do little things that feel off? Don't make your bed one day. And realize that when you do these things, the house didn't burn down. Mm-hmm. You are okay. Everything is still fine. And when we can learn those lessons in our everyday life, it then becomes easier to apply them in these really big moments.
I love that. Baby steps. I mean, I remember when I was really working on my perfectionism. I write handwritten thank yous still. I'm probably one of the only people on the planet that still does this. And I would, if I made a spelling mistake, I would start over. And so, like, to break through my perfectionism, I know you guys, maybe I need a little.
We could do some work on that. Just
we could, right?
You know, I work with businesses, you hear.
But what I started doing is just being like, okay, you spelled a word wrong, or you like can't read that word, just cross it off, keep going. And I mean, this was years ago, but like that little, I know it sounds so trivial, but that little trivial thing to break through this perfectionism actually had ripple effects everywhere, because then I became more gracious with people making mistakes. I became more gracious with myself making mistakes, with my team. And it was really, you're dancing again. I wish you guys could see this. It's so funny. She's a great dancer. But it's really fun. I think this is the thing that I want to like really dial in or take it home is when you start embracing your imperfection, when you start talking about your mental health, when you start saying, whew, guys, like, I'm not okay. Like, I know for me, well, I think every business owner, the times of Rona were really hard. You know, I was trying to keep 2 businesses open, keeping people employed, keeping customers happy, trying not to like go down the rabbit hole of all the things. But what's really interesting is to go back to your point from many minutes before, like taking that first step and having a conversation, you're suddenly like, oh, I'm not the only one that's having this challenge, or I'm not the only one that's feeling this way. Because I think, again, as entrepreneurs, we sometimes get so lonely at the top because, I mean, if you're in a great group of other entrepreneurs, that's amazing. That's why I think masterminds are so helpful, or therapists, like, but not everybody has that. But you do have friends that you can say, listen, I know you don't own a business, but can I just tell you about what I'm struggling with right now?
Yes. So all of that was brilliant. And yes, more of that for everyone doing. And part of why I was dancing was because the idea that when you were writing handwritten notes, which I love, by the way, you now just cross it out and keep going. Not only is that working on your own perfectionism, but it's allowing other people to be human. It's showing other people who look at you and go, oh my gosh, you are the successful entrepreneur who's doing so many things and you have everything together and you made a mistake. Wait, then I can make mistakes. Oh, wait, now that I can make mistakes and still be just as successful. That permission to let other people see your vulnerability allows them to be vulnerable. right?
Mm-hmm.
And I often speak at big conferences or for trainings in companies. And recently, one of the trainings I was at, it was a 2-day conference that people had traveled to. And I was like, anyone else have a hard time getting here? And I talked about how the night before I was supposed to fly out for this training, I was supposed to like pick up food on my way home and travel and go to sleep early so I'd be well rested and all of that. And I ate a bag of salt and vinegar potato chips because I was so tired from my day of work that on my way home, I couldn't figure out what to eat. I couldn't make a decision. I then sat on my couch and played solitaire on my phone for an hour until the notice of it is your bedtime came up. And then I started packing because I was exhausted and I was depleted. And it was only once I had to that I could get up. The most amazing thing happened was that because I was willing to say, I ate potato chips for dinner and sometimes just don't have it in me to take care of myself. When we did exercises about self-care, about active listening, about taking time for yourself, the reflections that came back were outstanding. They were remarkable. By leading the conversation, people who never met me trusted me as the person with the microphone to share with an entire room of 500 people that they cried in an active listening exercise and felt like they had a new best friend because someone listened to them for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It is outrageous what happens when we are willing to be vulnerable and go first. But we have to do our work in order to do that.
We absolutely do. And I think that is, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, talks about food and shelter and water. I think one of them, yes, obviously those things are very important, but one of the most essential human needs is to feel connected and heard. And I can tell you that through my 11 plus years of doing this, most team problems and leadership problems come with somebody's not feeling connected or not feeling heard. And so if you can do the work and you can, how can I say this? You can recognize that it's not personal. Everyone is having their own crap sandwich that day. Mm-hmm. And it's whatever they're dealing with is different for whatever you're dealing with. And generally, whatever has happened in that interaction has nothing to do with you. And I think that that's a really big thing that we forget because it's so easy for us to take things personally.
It's never about you. I love this conversation so much because it's never about you. And it's really, really hard to remember that when you're sitting with someone who is angry and apparently angry at you for something specifically that you did. And if you can figure out to not fight back, what we then do most times, especially if we have not done our emotional work, is we start to defend. But I did, but that's not, and it's your fault. And we get into this he said, she said, or he said, or she said, she said, or they said, and we fight. But what would it be like? Or just instead, next time try saying, wait, can you explain that to me? Explain to me your experience. And really try not to make yourself look good, not to change their story, to just understand where they are coming from, and then have a genuine response. Now, when I say genuine response, in my dream world, you're like, I can see how you felt that way, and I'm so sorry that was your experience. But if that's not how you feel after hearing their story, don't say that, because authenticity is more important than an apology. But say, wow, I'm surprised to hear this. I had a completely different experience. And at another time, I want to tell you about my version. Just try to understand. Don't fight about it. And that is not the moment to also try to repair it. That is the moment to try to repair that person as a human. Because when people are angry, you can't make waves. So let the heat go. And make an appointment for the next day or the next week, depending on who it is and how critical the situation is, of let's revisit to figure out what we're going to do next. And when you get to that meeting, don't revisit why they were horrible and that they can't be doing that and it's ridiculous. Okay, now that we're here, how do we move forward? because no one wants to revisit the moment that they lost it, that they were less than graceful, where they didn't keep their cool. Even if they're a person who knows that they do that, like, don't bring up somebody's worst moment. How are we going to move forward from here? What are we going to do next time? How do we solve this problem? But you can only solve problems when people's minds are open to the possibility.
Yes. And they're not emotionally charged from the moment.
Yes.
Which I think is key. Do y'all see why she's so good at what she does and also working with families? And I mean, I want to touch on this. We should probably do another whole podcast about family culture.
I'm totally available for that. I love it.
Let us know if you guys want us to do part 2 of family culture. But I think what you touched on just now is a really key component of family harmony, because when we're in family, and the reason I bring this up is because our businesses are our families, like they're our babies. And so I think there's a lot to parallel between your business and your family, but especially in your actual family, when you are able to take these tools of mental health and communication and not be, because I remember many times, just being like, well, you said this, and then you're like arguing and you're going back and forth, and like, no, everybody just feels like poo afterwards. And you're like, well, like, what did we actually accomplish? Whereas what you just explained is like diffusing the situation just by letting somebody be heard. And I think that lesson, like, I want to know a little bit more about family culture in that lesson, and how, because I see the correlation of how that line and lesson is going to, parlay really well into business conversations with your team.
Some of it is that it's exactly the same, right? So what I just talked about with businesses, and can you not take it personally? And can you just say, let me hear it from your perspective? Imagine as a parent saying that to your child. Just tell me what you heard. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what you experienced. Okay, interesting. Now let's go get ready for dinner. You don't have to fix it, because the truth is, just like with business, that person who is upset, it's not about the thing they're upset about. Because it's never about the thing. Like, yes, there are contracts and things to negotiate and details of things to be worked out, but most of the time, that's not the sticking point. Even when it comes to money, that's not the sticking point. Same exact thing happens with your family. It's not about the thing that your child is having a meltdown over. It is that they are emotionally overwhelmed. And you've seen it because there have been some moments where they will totally go brush their teeth without a problem, and other times where it's a half-hour tantrum. And you're like, what is the difference? It's not about brushing the teeth. And so a lot of the work I do is very behaviorally walking parents through what are the tools to bring in that harmony to your family. But I talk about myself as a family culture expert now because it is about shifting the culture of your family. It is not about every moment being full of rainbows and unicorns and sparkles, because that's not realistic. There are going to be bumps. There are going to be hard moments, because living with other people is complicated. But if you're willing to go through it, you get to have more beautiful moments. How do you sit down and have a fun family dinner? How do you get out of the house in the morning without people screaming? It's more about the culture, the environment, the feeling of your home that will then dictate those moments of behavior. If your kids scream and you scream back, that's your culture. We can talk about the details of getting dressed versus brushing teeth versus getting homework done, because those are the details of that. But it's really about getting around that and looking at, how do we communicate? How do we interact? How do we talk about mental health when I, as the parent, am struggling, or you as the child are struggling? Because the truth is, most parents don't talk to their kids about how they're feeling. We're told that we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to show our kids when we fail. We would never leave a note for our kids with a crossed out word on it. But why not? When our kids see that we are imperfect, it allows them to be imperfect. When we show our kids that we are learning, it gives them permission to learn. When we show them that we can have grace and be angry, they learn to have grace and be angry. It's not all or nothing. It's both and.
gosh, so much goodness. I mean, I honestly could probably talk to you about this for another, hours. We could probably have, it's a Joe Rogan length. Aren't his episodes like, I don't know. I've like never listened, but I think they're like 3 hours long.
It would be delightful every minute. But that is not what your listeners expect from these conversations.
I know. They normally get like little 15-minute golden nuggets, as I call them. So I wanna start wrapping us up. And I know we've covered a lot. So tell me, are there any last nuggets that you want to give our listeners that we didn't cover that you were like, oh, I really want to say this? And of course, I want you to share how it's best for them to get in touch with you, because I know many people will after this. Just, so juicy. I mean, I'm doing dancing, moving this over here too.
Yeah, for sure. I think I have two things that I want to make sure I share. One is that all behavior can change. So we are kind of taught that people are who they are, and you can't teach a new dog old tricks. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's the phrase. That's simply not true. I have watched people of all ages, of all sizes, businesses of all sizes and generations change because they wanted it. Mm-hmm. And so when there is motivation and inspiration, there is always a way to do it. So whether it is that you personally are struggling with something, or your company is struggling with something, or your family is struggling with something, please do not believe that that is just how it is. It's not true. And if you want it to be better, if you want it to be happier, if you want it to be bigger, if you want it to be something that it's not, there is a way to get there. And I am happy to help you find that way. If I am not the person, please go find the person that is, because Lauren is one of those other people who can help you get there. There is a whole world of possibilities, but know that it is possible. That's one. The second is there is no right way to do it. There's often this in the world of mental health, my friend went to this therapist and it helped, or my friend went to this retreat and it helped them, or my friend was depressed and did this exercise. And we then try it and it doesn't work for us and we get overwhelmed. Or we used to meditate and now we try and it just doesn't feel right and it's not working. That doesn't mean that you're broken. That doesn't mean that that tool is garbage. It means that you need something different in this moment. So when you need something new, find the thing that's right for you. Don't do it the right way. Do it your way. And in this world where we are in community and relying on others to teach us and guide us, it is very easy to say, but the expert said I should do it this way. Okay, well, the expert said you should do it this way. You tried it and you realize that if you add this flair to it, it works for you. So put your own flair on your mental health, on the tools that work for you, and find what's right, because there is always a way to make a change. See how those two are connected? Just do it your way.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm just going to add this one thing that actually really helped me, because you and I bonded. You guys don't know this, but I'm going to share. We bonded around trying to burn down our business. And one of us, actually both of us, did it in some fashion. And then had to rise like phoenixes out of the ashes.
And we both did.
And we both did. But something that, in the 2.0 version that I did very intentionally, which made all the difference, it honestly helped me double my business, was I took a full weekend day off. So I picked Saturday because it's like the day to, like, it's right after the weekend. A lot of stuff just happened Saturday night. I felt like I didn't miss out on a lot. And I would sometimes like unplug completely, like turn off my phone, turn off my computer, just read a book, maybe take and like sleep in, which I know is so taboo. But like, to your point, find what works for you. That worked for me. And it was so helpful. And it also gave permission to my team to take time off. Like, I'm a big proponent of like, take time. We have great work-life balance, but like, one of the biggest things for mental health is slow down.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so how can people connect with you? What's the best way for them to get more of this juicy goodness?
The best place to find me is my website, which is drmarcie.com, drmarcie.com. If you want more parenting advice, I would go to my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Marcie Beigel.
I love that.
Type it into YouTube and I'll be there.
Okay. And then one last question I've started asking all my guests. What is a book that you think every entrepreneur needs to read and why?
I love this question. I was not prepared for it, but what pops into my head first, which, you know, I trust that intuition, is the 4 Agreements.
Yes.
The 4 Agreements. I think that every person should read it. I think that if we all did our best to live our lives that way, that we would be happier, more connected people. And it's this short book that is like, you know, you could read it in an afternoon, but it's literally just 4 concepts of how to live your life that are fascinating to me.
I love that. 100% agree. It's actually right above my computer. It is always within like my line of sight. It is. You could absolutely read it in an hour, but the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word. We talked about this second one. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, which you guys have heard me say over and over again. You know, assumptions make a ass out of you and me. And also unshared expectations are nothing more than premeditated resentments. And then always do your best, which I think we could do a whole nother podcast on, because your best changes from day to day.
So true. And the first one is one of the 3 rules I use to change all behavior. That you have to mean what you say. Because when we don't, whether it's with kids or with your company, trust is broken even when nobody knows, but we like feel it. It's huge. It is ginormous. It is.
Yes.
Just, you know, focus on that one and it'll change your life.
Yeah. Being out of integrity, like you said, even if nobody knows, like internally it causes cognitive dissonance. And actually when I was going through this emotional intelligence leadership program, we had to acknowledge our broken agreements. So like if we said we were going to be there at 3:00 and we got there at 3:01, we would say, I acknowledge my broken agreement to be here at 3:00. What you can expect from me moving forward is to be early, or whatever it was. And it was radical responsibility. So yeah, I can see how that changes.
Love that. With parents, one of the things that happens all the time is that they'll put their child to bed and then they'll be, I'll come check on you in a few minutes. They know their child is going to go to sleep and fall asleep. And so they never go and check on them. And it's one of those moments that I'm like, no. Even though they're asleep, they know. Their system knows, because they're like in that half awake, half asleep place. You have to walk back in that room, or don't say it. Like simply just don't say it. And there's so much that we say that we just simply don't need to say in moments like that, where we could just say, good night, my love. I'll see you in the morning. And that can be that. And I love that example because it feels so concrete to me in so many ways that we do it that are super nuanced. Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been so wonderful, and I am definitely going to get you back for a second iteration of this, because I know we could talk about this forever. Yes. But that's it for this week's episode, everyone. Thank you so much for listening in. It's because of listeners like you that we create these episodes. So I'd love to hear from you, your biggest takeaways. So make sure that you're following along. Tag me on Instagram at It's Lauren Goldstein, or LinkedIn, or wherever you hang out on the interwebs. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Biz Doctor podcast. You're probably wondering what your next steps are. So here are some options for you. No matter what, head to the show notes or to my website at goldenkeypartnership.com. That's where you'll find links to do a diagnostic deep dive with me and my team. This deep dive will help us identify what is really holding you and your business back from more profitability, impact, and sustainable growth. After that, register for our next workshop. I host them often, and it's a great way to interact with me in a virtual room and get your questions answered. All of that info is on our website at goldenkeypartnership.com. Finally, if you love the Biz Doctor podcast, I'd be grateful if you share it with your friends and colleagues on social media or give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast.
This is Story Studio Network.